Our long national nightmare, a pox brought forth by used car salesman Ed O'Bannon's 2014 class action lawsuit, which netted roughly $1,500 per class member in exchange for societal happiness, is almost finally over. EA's college football video game is back. Peter Pan's marriage counselors and divorce attorneys rejoice. In celebration of our upcoming crippling arthritis and worrisome vitamin D deficiency from not seeing the sun, we're taking a look back at some of Penn State football's digital greats across a variety of gaming platforms.
Number 5. Shane Conlan, Bill Walsh College Football.
What better place to start than an old school linebacker U legend starring in the oldest school college football video game? Regardless of your age, Penn State All-American linebacker Shane Conlan needs no introduction. The heartbeat of the Nittany Lions' 1986 National Championship squad, Conlin racked up a then school record 186 solo tackles during his career, culminating in an unforgettable 8-tackle, 2-interception performance versus Big Bad Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. However, the video game that perfectly captured Conlin's 16-bit neck-rolled wrecking ball dominance probably requires a bit of a refresher course, even amongst Gen Xers who played it back in the day. In August 1993, EA kicked off its 2-decade reign of exploiting student-athletes' name, image, and likeness when it released Bill Walsh College Football on both Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. As you might imagine, EA's first foray into capturing the excitement and pageantry of fall Saturdays was a bit primitive. From a game day perspective, every player was the same size and the same shape. Kicker, nose tackle, speedy wide receiver, right guard, it didn't matter. Throwing was a pain in the butt too, since the game required users to open up sight-restricting passing windows, and breakaway runners would always get tackled from behind unless you made your guy repeatedly hurdle once he reached daylight. On the presentation side, the game cartridge didn't possess the bandwidth to hold player attributes, so EA chopped down a forest and inserted printed out 4x6 cards listing the skill level of every player on every team. Also, EA didn't acquire full licensing for Bill Walsh College Football. Therefore, if your team wasn't the proper name of a city or state, EA had to improvise. Ohio State was Columbus, Notre Dame was South Bend, and as you've probably guessed by now, Penn State was State College. Since Walsh featured current teams from the 1992 season and historical teams, most Penn State fans opted to play with State College 86, led by Conlin, instead of the putrid 7-win Blockbuster Bowl runner-up State College. On a 1 to 15 rating scale, Conlin was a 13 in speed, a perfect 15 in tackling, 14 in agility, and 14 in awareness. A dominant defender who infiltrated opposing backfields, swatted down passes, and repeatedly got the ball back to digital John Schaefer and digital DJ Dozier on offense.
Number 4. John Whitman and Brian Milne, NCAA Game Breaker.
Unlike the hyper-realistic video games of today, 20th century games lacked the same extensive research and the same meticulous attention to detail prior to release, which is why 2 Penn State fullbacks made this list. Playing 33 total games in blue and white, Brian Milne rushed for 512 yards, scored 16 career touchdowns, and is best remembered for punctuating Penn State's do-or-die scoring march versus Illinois in 1994, a sequence forever known as The Drive. Milne was also immortalized along with friend of the blog Keith Conlin on the commemorative Sports Illustrated issue that probably rested on your grandparents' coffee table from 1995 to 2001. John Whitman, similarly, posted a solid but not spectacular career in Happy Valley, compiling more than 500 yards on the ground and 14 touchdowns before embarking on a 6-year pro career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But, for whatever reason, on NCAA Game Breaker, which was the first 32-bit college football video game that was designed exclusively for the original PlayStation in 1996, the engineers and developers at Sony completely juiced Milne and Whitman's skills to superhuman levels. In the game, both Penn State fullbacks are inexplicably faster than all 3 of the Nittany Lions tailbacks, Curtis Enos, Mike Archie, and Stephen Pitts. That attribute glitch allowed users to spam opponents by inserting both Milne and Whitman in the wishbone formation, which allowed them to gash defenses both on the ground and through the air, as slow-footed linebackers were no match for the Nittany Lions' fleet-footed fullback tandem.
Number 3. Silas Redd, NCAA 13.
The penultimate edition of EA's NCAA football franchise, NCAA 13, afforded masochistic Penn State fans the chance to answer a disheartening what-if. Namely, what if budding superstar running back Silas Redd didn't bolt for USC in the wake of Mark Emmert's overreaching, heavy-handed sanctions? Fresh off a 1,200-yard sophomore season good enough to garner second-team All-Big Ten honors, Redd entered 2012 as the unquestioned cornerstone of the Penn State offense under new head coach Bill O'Brien. Knowing this, EA's developers did Redd justice, ranking him as the 9th best player regardless of position in the entire game. A game that was released on July 10, 2012, which was exactly 2 weeks before the NCAA's failed attempt to nuke the Nittany Lions program, and 3 weeks before Redd's July 31st transfer announcement. While EA got Redd's ultimate roster spot wrong, at no fault of their own, it absolutely nailed every other aspect of his skill set. As you'll remember, Redd wasn't an open field burner, so his restrictor plate 92 speed rating in the game seemed fair, if not a little generous. But, as you'll also recall, Redd was an absolute headache to corral in tight quarters, blessed with the ability to bounce laterally and stop-start better than any Penn State runner this century not named Saquon Barkley. That explains why Redd's 94 elusiveness rating was the best in the game, 1 point better than Michigan quarterback and NCAA 14 cover boy Denard Robinson.
Number 2. Derrick Williams, NCAA 09.
We know what you're thinking. How did Derrick Williams, a guy who never eclipsed 600 yards receiving in a single season and left Happy Valley catching a pedestrian 9 career touchdowns through the air, end up becoming a diabolical deep threat in video game form? 2 words: hype and forecasting. To better explain, allow us to bore you with a brief history lesson. In the early 2000s, EA's college football video game developers drastically altered roster and player rankings, forever changing the makeup of the franchise. Instead of outfitting the game with year-old rosters from the previous season, like they did in the aforementioned Bill Walsh college football, EA got in the crystal ball business and guessed/projected how good teams and players would be in the upcoming season. So, NCAA 06, which was released in July 2005, featured rosters and player rankings for the not-yet-played 2005 season. NCAA 12, which was released in July 2011, featured rosters and player rankings for the not-yet-played 2011 season. The new College Football 25 game, which comes out next week, will feature roster and player rankings for the not-yet-played 2024 season. Get it? That's why Penn State one-season wonders like 2005 Michael Robinson and 2002 Larry Johnson don't appear in this video, because EA had no reason to anticipate monster years out of either of them. Conversely, though, someone like Williams, who was the top 5-star prospect in the country out of high school and teased audiences with morsels of brilliance as a freshman, sophomore, and junior at Penn State, was graded on an unrealistic curve in anticipation of an All-American type senior season that just never happened. Specifically, in NCAA 09, Williams possessed an eye-popping 97 in speed and a 98 in acceleration, making him virtually unguardable on passes beyond 20 yards. All of this despite the fact that Williams was the 3rd fastest receiver on his own team in real life and ran a cement-shoed 4.65 second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine.
Number 1. Dan Conner, NCAA 08.
Considering his standout college career at Penn State was sandwiched between those of eventual NFL Pro Bowl linebackers Paul Posluszny, Sean Lee, and Navarro Bowman, Dan Conner's contributions in blue and white sometimes get lost in the crowd. But, in video game form, Dan Conner stands alone, above the rest, immortalized as the only Nittany Lion to ever receive a perfect 99 overall rating from EA Sports. Conner was a first-team All-American in 2006 and repeated as a first-team All-American in 2007 on his way to winning the Chuck Bednarik Award. So it's safe to say EA got this lofty rating right. In real life, during the 2007 season, Conner racked up a ridiculous 15 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 1 interception, and surpassed Posluszny on Penn State's all-time tackles list, a record he still owns to this day. And yet, somehow, Digital Dan Conner was even better. a sideline-to-sideline cheat code that dislodged footballs at an unrealistic rate, tossed 300-pounders aside like Bobby Boucher on an Aquafina bender, and honestly, would have made Penn State an unchoosable team for gamers looking for a competitive match, if not for digital Anthony Morelli evening things out on the other side of the ball.